The first step to weed-free mulch beds is forget about the landscape barrier. You don't need it. If you have a nice thick 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch, you don't need anything underneath it to prevent weeds. That's what the mulch is for. Hey, I'm going to give you some more tips on that, but I want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate you joining me as always. If this is your first time here, I hope it's not your last. Give me a thumbs up, comment below if you find this information useful. I did a video about keeping your mulch beds weed-free last fall. I will leave a link to that down below so you can get some more information. But it is coming up to close to a year since I installed the mulch beds in my back lawn. And in that year, I have done nothing special to those to keep them weed-free. Yes, I know. Well, it's easy to keep them weed-free because you don't have anything planted in them. It's just a bunch of mulch. I'm getting there. That is perhaps my most important tip, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But you don't need any kind of landscape barrier. No weed fabric, nothing underneath your mulch. A good thick layer of that stuff is all you need. The only time I will use any kind of weed barrier fabric is underneath rocks or stones, as I did when I installed the dry creek bed in my back lawn. But that is the only time I will use it, never under mulch. So I installed all these beds last season, and you can tell, I mean, they're still weed free. It's that simple. Along with not using a barrier, you just got to be diligent about going out and hand-picking weeds as you see them. It's really not that hard. Most of the time, weeds that get in your mulch are just right there in the top layer of that mulch. They're really easy to pull out, root and all. Now, in the video I did last year, which I'll link below, I also make it kind of a habit to every once in a while go out with some weed and grass killer, because the weeds are pretty easy to pick out, where the grass, especially the Bermuda grass, not so much. So I will take that weed and grass killer and zap, 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 pew, pew, pew. Make sure that I'm killing that Bermuda grass as soon as possible when I see it, because as we know with it, it will take over any part of your lawn very, very quickly. So make it part of your routine in your lawn to go out and pick weeds or zap it with a weed killer if you have some invasive grasses moving in. Now, after I installed the mulch beds last season, I knew that I wasn't going to plant anything in that first year. So I went ahead and applied a layer of preen. It comes in a shaker type bottle that you just flip open the cap and shake it out across the mulch and water it in. Basically, it's just like a pre-emergent for your flower beds. Now, I wasn't going to plant anything in my flower beds the first season, so I was able to do that. If you're going to plant something, I would hold off on that, okay? Here's the big thing as to why I did not get plants in the ground last season. Now, if you put plants in the ground, you're going to start getting weeds coming up through your mulch in that first season, and then it becomes harder to get them under control. Because if you have plants there, it's harder to see the weeds, and two, you don't really want to use a weed and grass killer around new plants that are freshly planted, because it can harm those or even kill them. So leaving the mulch beds like a blank canvas for the first year gave me an opportunity to see everything that was breaking through and get rid of them before they became a problem. If you've planted already, that's when it becomes much more difficult to control them, in my opinion at least. Now, I say that's my opinion, but if you've been following along here on the channel or watching our live stream on Tuesday nights with me and Joe from Wooderboy Productions, we have the Budget Wooder Show every Tuesday night, 9 Eastern, 8 Central, where we talk about our lawns and life and lots of other things. And on that show, you've been seeing some updates of the massive project going on in our front lawn. Had a huge hill. We've terraced it with some walls. Going to have some nice small areas of pretty level ground for manicured Bermuda grass turf. But in between the two walls is going to be all mulch bed, flower bed, garden bed space, whatever you want to call it. And just like I did in the back lawn last year, I am going to do this year in the front lawn for those mulch beds. I am not going to plant in the first season. Now, I came up with that just kind of on my own, but in discussions one day with one of the landscapers, he asked me what my plans were for those spaces. And I said, I'm going to put down a layer of mulch, and at some point, I am going to plant here. Lots of ground covers, perennials, some native plants, coneflowers, some shrubs, yews, things that are really hardy in the winter, low maintenance in the summer, don't take a whole lot of care to look pretty and thrive. And he told me one thing, and when he told me this, I thought, man, I've been on the right track all along. He said, after you get your mulch down, wait 2 or 3 months to plant anything. And I said, you know, it's funny you said that because that was my plan in the first place. Really, 2 or 3 months puts me into August at that point, once this is all said and done. So essentially, I won't be planting anything in those mulch beds in the front yard in their first season, just like I did in the back lawn. So what I thought was just kind of a good idea actually became a tip from a professional landscaper, and I'm just passing that along to you. Don't take my word for it, take his, okay? So if you want to keep your mulch beds weed free, just throw out the fabric, the landscape fabric weed barrier. You don't need it. You got to make it part of your routine to walk around those areas in that first season, pick weeds by hand, zap those that need weed and grass killer to keep them from coming up and taking over. When you get that mulch down, one good thing to really do right off the bat is put some preen down, water it in. It's like a pre-emergent for your mulch beds, and just don't plant anything in that first season. That way everything's wide open and you can keep the weeds from taking over while you've got fresh new plants in the ground, because you don't see them as easily then, and you don't want to spray a weed killer around those because it can hurt or even kill some of those if you get too much overspray on them. I know that takes a little bit more patience, but as you can see in all these mulch bed spaces in my lawn, we are 1 year since they were installed, and they are, for the most part, 99.99999% weed free. If you ask me, I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on it. Okay, my friends, that's going to be it for this edition of Budget Lawns. I hope you found this information helpful. I appreciate you as always, and we'll see you next time.